Ah, hi.
Hey,
Oh,
I apologize to you all. I was on the wrong link.
oh yeah.
My fault. I'm not awake yet.
Me neither.
I got back last night from my business trip around 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. And then I had to wake up around 5:30 to help my daughter go to school. So I'm still not awake.
Okay. Good morning.
V Gates, how are you all?
Good. How did your meeting go?
Yeah, it's one of these weird things where normally I'm not nervous for speaking in public, but then about 10 minutes before I got on, I got this very unfamiliar feeling of jitters. So I had to like calm myself and, breathe and think about good thoughts because I was in this slate of speakers and I was right in the middle of the slate. And, a couple people ahead of me, a couple people behind me, and they were saying everything I was going to say. And I said, I got no content. So I finally had to just go in and just deliver. So it actually went better than I expected given that. But I'm actually quite de-stressed and relieved that it's over. There's actually been some good conversations as a result. So thank you for asking. I'm feeling useful at work right now. Aaron,
What
thanks
did
for
you talk
getting in
about, Sam?
contact with me. It turned out I was on the wrong link, Aaron. So my problem. I'm not awake yet.
No problem. Thanks for organizing anyway. So thank you. Yeah.
And by the way, I did connect with Tammy, so I think she expects to be here today. Tammy's restarting her computer. Okay. So sorry to delay the beginning here. How are you all?
I'm good.
Robert. Yitzhak.
Hello.
Harry. Doug. Before we get started, Robert, gotta say kudos to what's going on with the Holo group in their money raising. That's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome, and I guess it's my first time joining the call. Thanks for inviting me, Sam, and just kind of excited in general, excited about collaboration. Unfortunately, I haven't had time to sort of dive in fully to watching some of your previous videos and other things. But
well, there's only about 80 or 90, so you'll be through it.
Yeah, and about the holochain, yeah, it's definitely very, very exciting. It seems every time I look at the Indiegogo campaign, it's like another surprise.
The world is crazy right now. Things are going to extremes.
You're in there, Robert.
Sorry, Harry, what did you say?
So Robert, you're connected to the holochain. I didn't know that. I love it.
Robert's just recently joined the holochain team, so I think he's going to bring an interesting perspective there. So he and I have been talking on and off for about a year or something like that. But we've been in communities that just seem to naturally want to mesh.
Cool. I definitely will buy one of those boxes.
It's $90, right? Virtual.
Yeah, I buy the big one, I think.
Oh, okay.
Just sold my house.
Ah.
There wasn't a relation yet, but now there is.
Wait, you didn't sink it all into Bitcoin?
No, I think holochain is the future, if I understand it properly.
Yeah. Anyway, again, my apologies. I'm going to state again for being on the wrong link and starting this call late. Normally, we do a round of check-ins, pretty short, 1 to 2 minutes each. So would people like to begin with that? I'll hear no objections. Would anyone like to begin? All right, since I've got the floor, I'll begin. I'll do another 30 seconds, okay? As I said, I just got back from a business trip around 1:30 this morning. Just to give you a perspective, it's 9 o'clock my time, 9:11 my time. But from 1:30 to 2, I was unpacking, and then I had to get up at 5:30 in the morning to help my daughter go to school because she catches the bus at 6:15. So I'm still not awake. I'm still not in possession of awake brain cells. And that's why I was on a different link this morning. So my apologies for that. And now the floor goes to
Doug.
Okay, I'm it. I want to just share an interesting what-if detour that my partner and I took this morning. We had a work session to work on what we call the collective metacognition MachineWorks platform, and which Robert, I hope someday to have go on Holochain as a distributed platform. But we ended up sort of going off on a tangent that got sort of interesting. And it was through a human being-centered lens and a sort of ecosystemic lens, how could one repurpose a shopping mall? Since there are a lot of them that today appear to be going out of business and obsolete for the times we live in. And what emerged was if you start piling in micro manufacturing and vertical farming and a mix of residential and retail spaces and affordances to turn a mall into a town, a community that was n-dimensionally integrated, where the people that lived there, contributed there, were sustained by the collective efforts, effectively replacing economy with its own internal ecosystem for sustainability. Once was obsolete and an albatross and a burden and a waste of resource, holds the potential to become a center of gravity for transformation. And I'll stop there, but that's sort of what happened this morning. And I, plant the seed because we will stand up a place for people that might want to kick this around. And I'm complete.
Harry. You did a good job nominating. Would you like to nominate?
Aaron reacted already. This is abandoned villages.
Okay, sure, I'll take it. I guess that's an indicator. Yeah, I'm doing well. Very cool to, actually the last week, kind of relevant to collaborating, I've gone pretty deep into trying to understand some blockchain applications, actually. So it would be great to hear about the holochain. There's so much going on, it's impossible to keep up. I mean, it's a Cambrian explosion. It actually seems like, is this kind of another form of a Cambrian explosion here? So I've kind of been digging into, maybe I put in 10 hours trying to figure out Aragon and District 0x. So thinking that seems, I'll add some links, seems that could be kind of a good surface to collaborate on, and forming platform co-ops, things like that, kind of related to it. I need to look into Holochain. That's somewhere on my list. Maybe I'll bump it up a little bit now that we have a contact. So cool. Otherwise, life is good, and yeah, good to see y'all.
Just a quick note. Tammy has had multiple conversations with Arthur Brock several times, so there's already in the GCC playlist a number of opportunities to make that connection.
And they've just launched their crowdfunding campaign as well.
By the way, Tammy, I want to introduce Rob Best, who's actually on the Holochain team. So he can tell us all about that later. Yeah.
Yes, Rob and I met at the Next Edge conference a couple years back. It's nice to see you, Rob.
Yes, same. I'm excited to be here.
The plot thickens.
Well, I guess I can go for, I guess, a 30-second check-in. I forget how you said it, but I guess just a slightly broader sort of intro than I gave before. I'd say I'm most interested in collective intelligence and augmenting collective intelligence, whether that means through technology or through more sort of social means. And that's sort of my entry into this world. I wasn't really playing online in sort of spaces such as these or virtual communities till about 2012, when I discovered this collective intelligence concept and found a community that George Poor had created on Google+, and that was sort of my window into meeting lots of very inspiring and interesting people, and that's how I got connected to one of my friends, Connor Turland, who has created a tool called MetaMaps, which I've also been working on since then, which is also like Holochain and open source project. And through Connor, I met the MetaCurrency project and went out to New York and did a thing called Emerging Leader Labs, which is like a social enterprise incubator there, and met Art and Eric of now Holochain and Scepter. It's kind of many layers to the project, and was very inspired by that. And we've just been, since then, trying to find ways to kind of devote more of my time, because until just recently, there wasn't a lot of funding. So it was all just free time and passion that went into contributing to these projects. So yeah, that's my kind of how I wound up here. And yeah, I'm most interested in sort of playing with conversational tools and means for sort of augmenting collective intelligence.
Okay, I will speak. I'm Harry van der Velde, in Eindhoven recently, since a week. Still in a total disarray. I can't find my stuff and all that. But I'm super excited to hear all these different stories and connections, connecting, and these patterns and this networks connecting and all that. That's exactly what I hoped for. Exactly what I see happening. I hear people hearing things that I heard somewhere else, and it's all coming together now. So that's very lovely to witness that and be part of it. And for myself, I'm just still in transition, still not knowing where to head, but I'm very happy to be here for the moment. So that's about it, I think. Thank you. Over. And I noticed the men introduced themselves and the ladies were silently waiting.
What was the guidance on the question today?
The guidance was, I'm sorry I'm late.
What I've been hearing is what our hopes are here. This is what I've been hearing since I've arrived. For me, I want to be a part of a team of people that are leaning into the future we need to build together. And yeah, Robert said around collective intelligence as well, just in terms of we know inside the kind of world that we want to build. And I personally feel a fair amount of cognitive dissonance with the way the world is now and the way that myself and other friends, peers, and colleagues would like to see us operate and cooperate together. So I'm excited to help to be a part of talking through and creating the kinds of systems and ways of relating that can more deeply connect us, and so that we can understand and grow our connective capacity, connective and collective capacity, to offer what we have and to bring what we have to the table, so that we can move in a direction together that feels good and is helpful. So I'm excited to be here and to be a part of this growing team of beautiful humans. Gertrude, if you might be speaking to someone else, but you're on mute if you're speaking to us.
I just got a phone call in and said I will calling back. But I could talk. I was pretty busy the last 2 weeks, and so I couldn't show up and I didn't tell anybody. So one of the things was we had an offer out for an organization of 600 people to create their collective purpose. They chose somebody else who did it more than we did. So they played the secure card. But I think the connection will stay, and they got what could be possible, but many of that group, they were too shy, too insecure to say, okay, we try that with you, because it's an Amber organization, so it's a governmental organization, and they were too afraid to go too far. Yeah, and we are in our group, the appreciators, we're in self-awareness process at the moment, how to have conflicts as friction gain. So how to deal with conflicts in a way that we learn from it, we improve, we develop. We had a pretty big conflict in May with coming out of a fire that one created, and all the stuff that came out of it, and really to realize how overwhelmed we all were, and now to clean up and to complete, so that. And there is one part of me who is the chosen or the elected lead link of our holacratic organization to hold the whole. So it's not only me, but also this, what is best for our organization. So I'm pretty much looking forward to the holidays and just easing down for the end of the year, and having my kids here and seeing my grandkids, and so this is pretty great. And one of our colleagues is working on this is called consent.works on he calls it a Swiss Army knife tool for organizations to have one way to go for everything, for the minutes, for the roles and projects and whatever. And we already use it for 5 years, but he has developed it further so others can also use it, not just us. And this is now right before the beta phase. So it could be come out before Christmas. Yeah, I'm just a little bit exhausted. and I realized that when I listen, for example, to Robert, I don't even know what you're talking about. So there's so many things that I just don't have a clue what's going on. And not to have this adrenaline, what do you say, driven thing, oh, I have to know it and I have to look it up, but to really go into that collective, and say, okay, it will emerge when I need to know it, and just be connected and stay there and relax and breathe. So, yeah. But I get some flashes of, oh my God, I have to know that. It's great to see you all again, and sorry that I just wasn't there without giving you notice. So that was more than 30 seconds. Sorry.
So I just also want to acknowledge a couple of things. First of all, I meet with Anna before this meeting, and I completely gapped. So I want to apologize, Anna. I'm so sorry. I've had, to be honest, I don't think I've ever experienced the amount of pressure and stress that I am in my life right now. And so that's not an excuse, but a recognition of the level of pressure. And I also wanted to thank Gertrude after a recent session we had when the focus was really on me. Gertrude took her time to go through, to do another session with me that really was amazing. So thank you, Gertrude. It was going through some of my numerological numbers, and in it, it was really clear that what I'm working on, my inner world is to support group work. That's also how people see me, but it's also a gap that I have, something that is a challenge in my life. So that was really interesting to see that the representation of what group work is in my chart is a strength and a challenge, and also what I am supposed to be doing. So I just really wanted to thank you for your care and your attention, and for really holding that space for me, Gertrude.
Gertrude, I just wanted to throw in that I followed Holo and Holochain development since their inception because I had connection to Farananda, who's another person involved with that project, and followed it, never able to penetrate it, grasp it, understand it, and figure out what the what was, until I screened Tammy's interview of Arthur Brock, where she translated and narrated what it represented, and all the legacy input clicked, sort of came together. And the last 2-3 years, what I've experienced is a non-learning, a non-payoff oriented learning experience like that in a lot of different areas, following a lot of different things, some with greater and some with much lesser degrees of actual understanding, but sort of confidence and comfort that it'll come together when it's supposed to come together. So I just wanted to share that like it's a different way of relating to it, but I think it's just as good or better.
Yes, and if I may add before Anna will check in, is that I learned to trust in environments like this one, that I don't need to understand everything and know everything because I have you guys. That helps.
Anna, you're on mute. Okay, I'm going to unmute you. Okay, now you're unmuted. I still can't hear you though. Is your microphone on? Your microphone may not be connected.
Can't hear.
Ah, now it's there. We can hear you now.
Okay. Good. So I missed Sunday, and maybe partly because of that, I feel sort of out of touch, and also because I'm actually focusing on a local group forming, Bootstrap, which is trying to link up 3 or 4 small towns in this Calder Valley, on the basis of a solidarity economy, and it was started by this guy who works with co-ops. So he's really encouraging people to set up co-ops and looking at really what's needed in order for us to become more sustainable as an area. And on Sunday we had a film festival which showed several films, one of which was from Brazil, and it was about a group that had set up their own bank and their own currency. So that's part of what is being thought about in this group. And I approached this guy, the main guy who set it up, Mark. We had a lovely talk, but I spoke about my focus being wanting to set up a space where people could share. So not having any particular agenda, but just somewhere where people could voice feelings and whatever was important to them. And his response was that he felt that he was a doer rather than a talker, and he not particularly into this sort of thing. But I didn't get the feeling that he would stop me doing it. It was just that it wouldn't be for him, which is fine. Not everybody wants to do this sort of thing. And so this morning I was talking to somebody from Leeds University who has offered to set up a group, but in Leeds, And so I was wondering whether somehow we could connect, because I'm about an hour away from Leeds. And so he's put me in touch with somebody else, and possibility that we could start something locally. So that's really what's been around for me. Also an interesting group that Tammy invited me to, and also Gertrude is on that, Women Matters, I think it is, which broadcasts once a month on YouTube. And we've had a little correspondence following that about this guy, Jordan Peterson, who is a really impressive and competent psychologist who is looking at, well, it seemed to be particularly biblical references when I was watching, but I'm sure that he ranges far and wide. And I was taking up the fact that this is couched in in a hierarchical way, because that's the way that our education has always been and continues to be. And it's quite difficult even to begin to think ourselves out of that. I mean, what we're doing here, for me, is specifically valuable because we don't have leaders here. And so, yeah, I was trying to point out that I wasn't trying to take away from the ideas that he presents or the value of them, but just that the paradigm in which it's presented reinforces that patriarchal model of creating celebrities and people with high status so that, you know, we're almost afraid to approach them because they're somehow on some elevated plane. So that was an interesting conversation. And that's me, yeah.
I know that several of us have expressed excitement around the connections that are being made and the interweaving that's being done. And you might know this, particularly Doug, but I only recently realized that your partner, Fabian Luzansky, is in a PhD program at ITBA, the Technology Institute in Buenos Aires, in systemic leadership, where one of my very good friends, Alexander Laszlo, was the one who created that PhD program. And in fact, he and I were in discussions for over 6 months because he and I and Dino were helping him define the curriculum and the degree requirements for the Systemic Integration PhD, Systemic Leadership PhD. So that just blew my mind when I realized that connection with you and Fabian. And the other connection was about 1.5 years ago is when my very good friend Jack Park said, hey, let's go to Oakland to the Impact Hub today because there's this guy named Arthur Brock talking about this thing called Holochain. And that was what started a whole series of conversations with Matt Schutte, which then, you know, got me connected with Rob. And that's been, I think, very promising. And we're still trying to figure out how to work more collaboratively and more closely on that front as well. So it is really interesting. And just to complete that thought, a number of the postings I've been making to the GCC Facebook group recently have been coming from Sherry Herndon, who used to be here in Seattle. So I actually met her when I moved here. But she's now taking a very long road trip. But she actually has been doing a lot of reading, a lot of writing. She's connected with this big community around Barbara Marx Hubbard, whom I also very much admire. And so that's another community I would like to bring into connection with us. And that actually gets us even a little bit closer to the people who practice tantric living. And that's another thing that I've often felt has a lot of lessons for us to learn as well. So it is a really fascinating time.
And just to chuck in a couple other interesting connections, I met Sherry way back in the day, probably 2001, after the Battle of Seattle, when indie media was born and was part of the Vancouver indie media group that had formed as well. And right around the same time met Barbara Marx Hubbard at the Prophets Conference here in Victoria. So the circles are weaving, and this feels amazing. And I like this focus on connection today.
When you're talking about this, when we created Unity and Diversity last year, on the before, on and after the Integral Conference in Hungary, our basic assumption was creating a system of influence. Margaret Wheatley, she talked about that, about these networks coming together for self-interest, and then on a higher level that networks come together to be what do you call practice, to communities of practice to achieve something. And the next level, and that is where change really happens, is when those community of practice with networks gel together to a system of influence. So it's the third dimension of connecting, and out of this change happens. And she says only this way. So she went back in history and looked at when did change happen, and it was always like when the mushrooms come together with their what do you call it, mycel in German? Mycelia, yeah. And that's and I just, when I listen to you, where there's it feels like that, this, you know, there are some connections, but it's not yet interwoven and not yet strong, that this change, it's on its way, but it's not achieved yet. So, but near tipping point. And that what brought us together to say, this is our purpose. This is what we want to create. And Women Matters came out of this. So we did an appreciative inquiry process, and in the destiny phase, you look, what do you want to do with people, and what do you want to achieve? And 1.5 years later, we still have monthly calls, and there's still some other groups going on. And yeah, and now connecting the dots. Anna is here and there, and you know, like, this is really, really great. And it feels, I mean, it's coming to me when you talk like this.
See, I was already excited, but now I'm even triply excited, because how you talk about influence and these interconnections is how I think when I talk about community of impact. And this is an extension in my own interpretation of what Doug Engelbart was talking about when he was talking about C communities, which are networks of networks. And that's how you get the greater than linear, you know, capability explosion, you know, when you actually start improving the improvers is the theme, you know? Yeah, so this is very exciting to me. Even though the word improver is loaded.
Is it?
It is.
Why?
Embedded in it is a judgment meme that isn't required. You don't have to invite that to the party. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
I would say improvement says it's not good enough yet. And we need to, yeah, improve it. And
There's no need to improve the present.
yeah.
It does beg the question, can there be distinction without judgment?
Yeah.
I think so. Black and white.
Distinction is a useful notion because otherwise why have words? But if you have judgment on them, then that's energy you probably don't need. And that's also a judgment.
Wow.
I think if you see it as a process rather than as a static, then you can see.
Anna, can you amplify your microphone? You're very soft.
Oh, is that better? No.
Is there a sensitivity setting on your microphone? Or move it closer to your mouth, maybe?
No, it's right close to
Yeah,
my
that helps. That helps.
Okay. So I was thinking of an integral and how everything actually has an important part to play. And so if we see...
Anna, it's not good.
Yeah, Anna, your audio is very, very soft.
Okay,
And yes, that's a judgment.
I'm going to change to a different...
Yeah, I don't recall you having these problems before. So when I said Anna's audio was soft, was that a distinction I was making to be useful, or was that a judgment that came across as negative?
It was a statement of fact.
Yeah.
It's quantitative, though. I mean, you know, it can literally be measured by how much I forget the eardrum. There's some piece that vibrates. So it's literally quantitative. There are qualitative areas we could go into, which will be different.
Yeah, it's not judgmental in that sense of better and worse. I mean, morality is, there isn't a very clear distinction, but better somehow implies some sort of moral judgment. And if we see it as a process of development, then we don't need to see one part as being better than another or an improvement, but they're just part of this process of development. Sorry, I don't know if it...
I guess I'm curious about the role of discernment as well, because we need to be able to articulate something, and that requires a level of discernment. I know this is getting very semantic, but you know, I think that it is important to be able to discern what is truth, and I think that discernment and what we're growing into is what collective discernment is. Where are the places where we agree upon what it is that we're talking about, and how can we, I feel that's the muscle, that's one of the muscles that we're building.
Could you say more about sort of what you mean by discernment? Like what that mean, how would you sort of define or frame what that is?
Well, I feel that discernment is using more of my senses to be able to understand the energetic and a wider understanding of a field of and a judgment for me is based on what I believe, and has a lot more to do with maybe my understanding of how my values are playing through what I might express. But it's not necessarily sensing what is actually happening, but rather coming from a static belief in what it is that I think about something. So, discernment for me is a part of what deep consideration of a subject or a topic is with me in it, as a conscious being that is looking to navigate how I understand it in the first place, while making a certain amount of value judgments, but more to do with a living sensing in the moment.
Can I express some? This is probably the biggest confusion of my life. Let me describe it this way. Let's suppose, and stop me after I tell this 1 or 2 minute story, and then poke holes in it. But this is the way I'm actually understanding life right now. There was a day in which I popped out of my mom and started sensing things, and certain of these senses, I couldn't, of course, name them when I popped out, but certain of these things eventually became called warmth or softness or satiation. And some of them were called pain, some of them were called noise, some of them were called cold. And gradually over time, there was a group of them that I would prefer to lean towards, and there was a group of others that I prefer to lean away from. So that is this duality that introduces itself in my life relatively early on and kind of gets reinforced through my entire life. Eventually, somebody comes by and says, oh, these are good and these are bad. And so I learned to use those words, whether it's in Taiwanese or whether it's in English or whether it's in Esperanto or whatever, okay? So then I take other phenomena that actually generate more of these things and I say, okay, those things are good. And I take other phenomena, decisions, actions, practices, places, whatever, events, and they generate more of these things and I say, okay, those things are bad. And that's the way we operate when we're unconscious. And I would swear, I could not actually even formulate a thought till I was at least 14 years old, okay? Every thought until then was somebody else's thought that was just bouncing around in my head. So now I'm thinking, if there is a way to appreciate this phenomenon that is, in a form, a distinction, it's a discernment. I associate these patterns as things that produce these good feelings and other patterns as things that produce these bad feelings. And it's almost impossible to work yourself way back to that moment of birth and sort of re-examine all of that and then sort of rebuild all of that phenomenology and life experience. So at some point, there's a certain amount of that that's subconscious. It's just built into, and it's compiled into my brain, into my mind. And yet, would anyone say that that's not useful in some way? Granted, there's a lot of danger in thinking that way. But in some way, it was successful because this is how species survive, is by using these distinctions and gravitating towards these things that promote survival and promote a well-being. So I think there's this balance between whether we want to be away from dualism or whether we want to take advantage of the fact that it has served us in some form or fashion. And if we can, okay, so this is an extrapolation now, this is a hypothesis. If we accept that without attachment, in other words, say some discernment is useful, some discernment is actually danger producing. Danger not in the physical sense, but danger in a maybe relational sense, maybe in the emotional sense. So I'm trying to find, is there a balance, or should we quash all dualism, or should we just accept that, hey, things are the way they are, and why talk? Why use words at all? You know? So there's this big confusion where everything's connected in this, I don't even know if it's a story, but it's a question, basically. What I'm basically saying is a question, okay? That's got a lot of different ways to go. And let me just stop there right now. But I think I've kind of introduced an area which, because of my confusion, I could not present clearly, okay?
I understand all there is change. And we only can perceive change through the discernments, distinctions, whatever you name them. And that's where it all starts and ends. It's itching.
I have some thoughts about it. I hope it's not going to be too long. First, I think we cannot, I mean, talk is good, but we cannot grasp the world around us without words. So we can feel something, have sensations, body sensations or otherwise, but there is no possibility to grasp that. There was a woman who had lost her hearing and her eyesight through an illness, and through a teacher who taught her how to give the alphabet in tapping in the hand and things like that. So she could have words, and she described Helen Keller, and she described how that felt. Before, it was undiscerned, it was just being, but not in a way that she could enjoy it. It was like this basic something, and through words she could grasp water or whatever that was. That was her first word, and so the gift of words was the biggest that she ever got. She wrote books and was an amazing being, which she could not have been without her teacher teaching her words, how to, I mean, this way. So I think that's fundamental. So we need to express ourselves in a way, and that is discernment by nature. So, and being aware of this and not saying this is the truth, but this is the way I can grasp reality or around me. And also giving up that I am when I realize something and have words for it, that this is the only way to address this particular thing. And to give up that I have the right way of seeing it. I can just describe what I'm seeing and how I see it, but not as the truth, but as my truth about this. And what you described, I think survival was that way. So running away from pain and going to pleasure that helped us to run away from the saber-toothed tiger and grasping berries. We came up with a model, which is not the truth either. We called it the streetlight model, and we look. So when you are in survival mode, you are just working on stem brain. This is like where the adrenaline, this is reflexes only. So if there is a bus coming towards me, I run, or whatever that might be. So there is no conscious something, but only reflexes. So, and there are some politicians we know that run on the on stem brain. And this is only adrenaline, and adrenaline just reduces everything else than just muscular fight, flight, freeze. And when you go further, the limbic system comes in, and there's discernment, there's the possibility to distinguish. And there is adrenaline and oxytocin at the same time. So it's looking for, it's like, when I go back to the saber-toothed tiger time, you ask for your companions to join you, to help, to fight this. So you have some words, you have the possibility to react in a way where your brain is there, but it's like a computer brain. So you know how far the distance is, you know how to see the footprints, but it's not survival at this moment, but to prevent danger. So it's all about how can I prevent danger? How can I have survival more sure? Not just in that moment where I only can react, but how can I prevent things going bad, or have people, guardians to cry out when the saber-toothed tiger is around. And this is also only for survival, but in a more sophisticated way. And I think that was the mode we have had all the time till, I don't know, till recently. And so you can go with the adrenaline, or you can go with the oxytocin to find the group together and fight whatever that might be.
Gertrude, we probably didn't get your last bit. You were on mute for the last part of it.
No, I wasn't, but maybe there was something wrong.
Oh.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, just short. And the last one is where oxytocin is there, where you're together, and where the whole brain, the whole left and right hemisphere and everything. And this is where flow comes in, where people, it's like the campfire mode. We are safe enough to create, to be together, to connect, to be in a loving connection and not just in fear. So I think there are different levels, and it's not all mixed up in which we are. Anyway.
I'm just going to jump in, because one of the pieces that I'm hearing that you were sharing, Gertrude, is it's interesting to think of all of those levels, and there is a global survival crisis happening and I think that definitely plays into where we're all at, because we can feel this need, and it's very real, and it feels like overcooked spaghetti, I guess, in certain ways. It's like, all of it's there, but it's all mixed up together. So to get to the state of flow requires a lot of work on a lot of different levels. And then looping back to where you started, just in terms of communication, I feel that a big part of what we're needing and doing is to do with connecting. Like there's a felt need for all humans to be connected and to belong, and a big part of how we do that is through communicating, and it's kind of a living expression of connection. And one of the things that nourishes me so much about being in this space is that we are deeply and truly connecting as human beings, and from that, I think is a ground for being able to navigate together what actions we can take, how we can help and serve each other, how we can understand more deeply the context that we're in, and communicate that. And a lot of what we're facing has never been faced before, like this, as in multi-system crisis and collapse, while we are growing our capacities for conscious discernment, as you were talking about, Gertrude. And, I guess I'm curious how we can be in all of those fields, both the, oh my gosh, we're kind of at the end of the road here, as well as the second stage where we're responding and we've got the oxytocin and we're beginning to discern, and then we're moving into a flow state. And I feel really grateful to be able to practice that with this group. And it is important for us to put it in words and use the tools that we have to bridge understanding and to make connections for others and for ourselves, because that feels like the living actions that support our emergent work here.
Anna, please go.
Sam, are you going?
I'll follow you, Anna.
Okay. I just wanted to come back to where this conversation started, which was about what's wrong with judgment. And I think it's really important to look at that in a bit more detail, because, there is this development of discernment, but there is something about judgment which leads to prejudice, leads to preconceptions, leads to feeling that we know something when we may just know some very small part of it. So I'm just feeling around. I don't have an answer to this, but I feel that judgment is different from discernment, and nobody is objecting to discernment, but something about judgment takes us to the wrong place. And so I'd like to sort of tease into that. What is it?
Could I throw out a hypothesis on that one? It seems like judgment has this polarity of the good and bad implied in it. And the problem seems to be that my good and bad are not your good and bad, and your good and bad are not my good and bad, right? Where if we assume that they are the same, then number one, that's going to lead to a misunderstanding or disagreement or possibly even a war down the line. And I think that's the problem. And yet to try and come up with these universal good and bad, I think that's a fool's errand. You know, we think it's so fundamental, but it's really not. We've been trying for millennia. I'll leave it at that, and then I got a bunch of things left to ask later.
Just to clarify that, I don't think it is that our goods and bads are different. I think it is that some part of us doesn't want to allow there to be any bad. This comes back to a discussion that we've had before, you know, that no one should be left out of. Everything needs to be included in this loving relationship.
Community?
Loving community, okay. So bad is actually saying there are some things which are not allowed into this community.
Like war?
And if that, like war, well, yeah. I don't know. I mean, you know.
Like plague?
Well, when you say it like that, it does seem sort of obvious that there are certain things that we don't want, that we're for life rather than death. But
I don't think it's that obvious.
okay, yeah.
If we were that obvious, we wouldn't have this conversation.
Can I ask a question? I'm going to ask a question.
You go for it.
Have any of you ever done something you didn't want to do? Then why did you do it, right? I mean, so there's a bit of a paradox there, and I think that there are a lot of paradoxes that we're trying to address here, right? Because if you did it, then that means that you wanted to do it. I think that we might be. Well, what do you think? What do you all think?
Well, let me ask you, Aaron. Have you not done anything that you've not wanted to do?
Have I not done anything that I've not wanted to do? So that's a double negative.
Or is everything that you do things that you want to do?
Yes,
right?
It is.
In other words, everything you do was not ever something that you didn't want to do.
I believe that everything that I've done is what I wanted to do, at least when I do it. Afterwards, sometimes I regret it.
Yeah.
Can I quibble with that slightly?
Yeah.
Without much judgment here, okay? Have you ever been 5 minutes late for a meeting? And was that something you wanted to do?
It is, because there were other things that I was doing, and that led to me being 5 minutes late. It's true.
Okay. And you've been in accidents where you've hurt yourself, but that was something you wanted to do?
Yeah, that was not my intent, but that's what happened. And everything that I was doing up to the point where gravity took a hold of me and, removed my free will, right? So gravity did have power over me there. And maybe power actually relates to the conversation here. right? Like I had my free will there, but then gravity just took that out of the picture at some point. So I was no longer able to change that. And actually, power could be an interesting topic to bring into this whole conversation too. But yeah, but what do you?
I think what you're introducing, Aaron, is context, so that these things are not universal, but it depends on the context. And in the context of whatever it is that you're doing, you do what you want to do. It maybe, as you say, doesn't lead to actually where you wanted to go. It leads you to somewhere else, but you were actually doing what you wanted to do at that time.
Yeah. So yeah, when I trip, I'll try to tuck to minimize the damage that's done, but I can't spring out of I can't stop the laws of gravity for that moment too. Yeah. So yeah, the context of that.
Another context that's important to consider in this particular part of the dialogue is the role that privilege plays in being able to do exactly what it is that you want to do. I think that bears some scrutiny, and as well as if we're talking about a level playing field and equal access and some of these values that we hold around a peer style of doing things. Not everyone has the ability or capacity or the privilege of doing exactly what they want to do. So there are also social and economic and other considerations that may play into being able to devote your time exactly how you would like to. And I would suggest that is a true freedom. And it's not a judgment on you saying, oh my gosh, you're so privileged, Aaron. It's just a recognition that privilege plays a big part in being able to do exactly what anyone wants to do, and that's not possible for every person. And Sam, you're teasing out some considerations in terms of, oh yeah, I know. Did you want to hurt yourself? And I think that's an interesting line of curiosity. But I think that the place of social privilege is something that, yeah, that can be perceived as a judgment of some kind. But it is, I don't want to see us being afraid to talk about these pieces that may be taken personally, but are actually just representations of reality that we need to be able to wrestle with and deeply consider together.
If I may, I wanted to offer something, and that is around this topic of words, which has come up for many, many such conversations. And that is, almost by definition, if not even specifically by practice, word definitions are approximate. You just recognize there's multiple different dictionaries out there, okay? And these dictionary definitions may or may not even have been available to some of us. We don't get our meanings from definitions. We get them from daily practice, okay? We all have different experience when we're introduced to some of these words and terms. So I think if we lean, I like this term you use, Tammy, if we lean into and listen into the intent behind what is being said using those words, if you're reasonably generous and reasonably receptive, you can get the gist of what people are really trying to offer. But if you let the words and those technical distinctions and quibblings and ego distinctions and say, oh, no, you're not using that word right. You really meant to use this other word, or that has another implication which I don't like, or any of these little things that are secondary or tertiary issues in the back of your mind, without that generosity of really understanding the person speaking and their intent, words can divide. And words can lead to disagreement, and it's just this very easy way. That, to me, is the Tower of Babel. That, to me, is what it means for words to separate us. But I don't think anyone here is saying that words are not useful. But words can be used in contracts and, dictionaries, and all these can be used to just create all kinds of conflict and all kinds of litigation and all kinds of enforcement without really getting to the essence of what someone was really trying to intend to communicate. That's the Tower of Babel problem to me. Over.
I have to leave, just saying goodbye.
Thanks, Anna.
We'll talk to you Sunday, Anna, hopefully.
Yeah, I'll be there Sunday.
I think what Anna said, I find very important to go back to, maybe over and over again, about bad and good and likable or not, how you started them. I think there's also should be a discernment about actions that are not workable or that are doing harm in a real way. Like I'm thinking about the oil out of the pipelines or whatever that is, and to call that out, but without, how could I say, without judging persons, or without being on a personal level to demonize people and making them the evil either way. But addressing what's not working, I think that is important. So to include, or to have bad and good are alike, I think that is when it comes to judging people. But I think there are actions that maybe I can understand what's happening, and then not just taking my gun and go out and shoot someone because I don't like them, but to go back and say what could be a good next step to make that undo or reverse in any kind without harming other people or the people I don't like. So I think there is also something as if there is no hierarchy of values, as if everything is just the same, and I don't see it that way. If you don't distinguish that, nothing matters.
But once you do sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm fine. It's maybe I come back, but for me, sometimes I have the feeling that in certain conversations, this is like everything is equally mishy-meshy. Values are completely stirred and
yeah, I think we use a lot of these examples in order to tease out that not all values are the same and not all values are equal. And the problem is we seem to have this preference for coming up with a universal set of values, which again, I think is impractical. On the other hand, if you watch a movie like Valkyrie, could you really blame someone way back in the whatever year that was, who tried to lead a revolt against Hitler and tried to assassinate Hitler. Could you really blame that person for using death as a tool against someone who had, been committing atrocities? If you admit that there are differences between values, and if you think that there is value to human life, then is there a value to 5 million human lives as balanced against one? I'm also going to suggest that those of us who are really, really, really trying to figure this out and really trying to connect and really trying to figure out what kind of world we want to live in, I'm suggesting that we release this sense of urgency. Because the sense of urgency will lead us to take shortcuts. It's a very strong influence in taking shortcuts. What I'd rather see is perhaps a consideration that says, even in an apocalyptic scenario, is there going to be 0.0000001 of us who may survive? Or is it really going to be 100.0000000% of us who will disappear? It's an interesting question to me, because if there's a chance for the Earth to reproduce another epoch, which has maybe human-like entities, and by the way, it has happened before, then the Asimovian notion that we set up foundations and try and shorten these periods of darkness, or perhaps provide some knowledge or wisdom that might help the next opportunity, might be a good way to think about this. I mean, each of us individually are going to disappear anyway. We as a civilization may need to give way to the next civilization if we don't get this right, quote unquote. That's a judgment, that's a value. But we determined that ourselves. It's a privilege and a responsibility to use our tools, our knowledge, our capabilities to, do something for our survival. And if we don't, so what? Another civilization is going to come by, another species is going to come by later. We're just going to be, given that chance, and we flunked the test. Can we do it with such a sense of detachment so that we're not constantly in the sense of urgency that's going to drive us to make hasty decisions and therefore, quote unquote, yes, I'm going to say it, bad decisions? Over.
So I just want to put my finger on a little tension. And Aaron, I'm curious if me bringing up the notion of privilege in terms of you being able to do exactly what you want to do, how that landed on you, and if it made you feel like you were shutting down a little bit.
That's interesting. Well, I actually do have to run on the point. It's my mom's birthday, so not to. I won't be running because of that question, but yeah. So that it seemed that. Well, yeah, that wasn't what I was saying. I wasn't saying that in some kind of way of I do what I want. I do what I. Not as some kind of I'm powerful and wealthy, but more so as certainly I am. I'm very privileged, right? I'll own that. But yeah, I didn't. I hope that wasn't interpreted when I said that as my morals are superior and I do whatever I want to. So I was kind of afraid that maybe you in particular interpreted what I was saying that way. So yeah.
Yeah, it's not meant as a value judgment at all. It's just a recognition of what privilege is. And I recognize that it's a loaded term in this day and age, privilege. And so when I say it, I don't mean that you are wrong for having certain benefits in your life or being able to, it's not a making you wrong. It's a recognition that some people have more privilege than other people. And the flip side of that is envy or jealousy. And so one of the things that I've been noticing in my life is that several times over the last couple of months, people have expressed envy to me. And it's a very caustic emotion. So, and is the flip side of privilege. And so I'm experiencing that tension in my life because I do recognize that I have a lot of privilege in my life. Like there's not very many people that can devote their time to things, what I like to call the will of my soul, right? And I recognize that as a deep privilege. And there's several people in this group and in my life here that have expressed a sense of envy or jealousy that I can choose to do that. And so I'm on both sides of that, Aaron, and I just wanted to, sorry, something scratching. I just wanted to, that's all right, to be able to put my finger on that here, because energetically I could feel you kind of like move back a little bit and feel that sense of judgment. And that's not what I meant. And I think that it's important to feel into those places of slight uncomfortability to come to understanding together about what it might mean without this value judgment overlay.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, there's a really interesting dynamic around, given your identity, are you able to speak about things? And then people seeing, oh, look at, based on his identity, he's speaking about that, or she's speaking about that, or whoever is speaking about that. And this whole dynamic that occurs there, right? Ideally, we can separate identity and then just talk about concepts, but it's very difficult. And then, you question, wait, based on my identity, maybe I'm not seeing things correctly. And right, there's this whole dynamic there. It's interesting. I literally do have to run now. So, and it is a tough topic too. So I wouldn't say it's not. So, take care.
Yeah. Happy birthday to your mom.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Give her a hug for us, please.
Thanks.
I was just thinking, Tammy, if Aaron was asking, is it will? Did you do what you wanted to? And the way he was talking about it was, for me, more about responsibility. Am I able to take responsibility for all my actions if I consciously wanted to do them or not? And even those that were fear-based and maybe some big drama behind it. But am I willing to take responsibility completely for myself? And but this is a very fine line when you talk about underprivileged people. They say, oh yeah, it's their fault, because if they would be responsible, just a few days ago, one of the senators said, people go spend their money on booze. People on women, interesting distinction. People on women, and cinema. So it was like those who have enough money, they earn it because they. When the others, that's their fault, and they spend it on the wrong things. So it's like talking about responsibility. I can only talk about myself. I cannot impose it on others, because I don't have a clue what they are going through, what their life is about, and what their tribe or whatever, whoever went through in the past. So, yeah.
yeah, I don't know why. I feel like it's really good for us to talk about what's present here in the group, which is part of why I wanted to kind of go to how Aaron might have felt in being kind of called out, right? Like there's a sense of judgment and calling out in what I said around privilege, but I don't know how much that has to do with the heaviness of the term privilege and the social dictopedia ways of knowing what that word means. And part of that is that I feel that every one of us should hold privilege, should have the privilege of dignity. And so it is a different, there's a different place that I'm coming from when I bring that up. And the very real of envy and what the experience that I've had in people envying me is, because it feels like, in a way, it feels like something's being taken away from me. And it brings into question, you know, the work that it's taken to be able to express, you know, and do the work that I'm motivated to do. And it feels like both privilege and envy are biting away at that strong core that allows that to be there.
Is it that you've worked so hard and for so long to put yourself in a situation like this that now you are able to spend the time to focus on things you find important, that those two pressures or tensions are eroding your enjoyment of what you've been able to create for yourself?
That's definitely part of it, for sure. And yeah, and the very real piece of me carving out some time for myself and then having it be eroded by these various fires that I've got going on in my life is a very real frustration, because it's really hard for me to sit in my power while I'm responding to these crises. And quite literally living in a home where one of the people here actually holds hatred in her heart for me. So a person who is, I say hello, she says nothing. And, you know, I express to her, you know, I ask her what she needs, you know, does she need to yell for a little bit? Does she need to, you know, what can make this feel better for everyone? And she says, I just want you to respect that I want space from you and that I don't want to be speaking to you. So that affects me very deeply. I don't feel safe in my home. And it's not perfect. You know, I've invested 11 years in creating a loving community. And now I have a month where I have to live with someone who is actively giving me the silent treatment, and where I and won't respond. You know, I say, well, I'm not going to change who I am. I'm going to say hello to you. And she's like, that's fine, as long as you don't mind that I don't respond. So there's no movement. There's no maturity there to be able to, you know, show up as in a way that would, well, there's my judgments, you know, like I don't know, but I'll tell you that feels incredibly uncomfortable. And I have to live here. You know, I'm considering, where do I go somewhere for a couple of weeks so that I don't have to be in this energy?
Is it time limited to a few weeks?
Yeah, she moves out on the 1st of January.
Wow. Consider yourself lucky. Some marriages are actually like that for much longer.
I wouldn't choose that.
Yeah.
Anyway, not to make this about me, but it's, you know, it's a reality.
This is a good time to smuggle you across the border, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Gertrude,
Gertrude.
I think the most important part in this is not shrink in your energy field.
Yeah.
But to stay in the face of the fire, so to say, in your whole field. And like when somebody doesn't read back, to say, okay, then I don't do it either. So when you say, I want to be a loving person, to be a loving person, even in the face of no answer, no. So that she doesn't turn you round into a grumpy person that you don't want to be. And I think that's the biggest challenge in that. Like one of the monks who was incarcerated, I don't know, in Burma somewhere, and he was there for many, many years, and he said the hardest thing was not to hate myself. To stay connected with my own love.
Thank you for that, Gertrude.
Yo.
It's very subtle, these things, you know, and also really clear. Like, you know, throughout this, I've definitely expressed that that's what I've wanted to do, and I have been able to do it up until the last couple of days. The last couple of days have just been really hard.
Yeah.
So it's a good reminder, and I will endeavor to find my strength.
Yeah. And not giving away the power of your own love to somebody else, and say, okay, you have the power to turn me in a person I don't want to be. This is the breathing, the oxytocin breathing that Ellie Drake taught us to get the adrenaline out of the body and have oxytocin on the rise. This is like breathing out first, just deeply breathing out, and then let the breath come in, just allow it to come in. And with the next exhale, have an like HA, like and with a pleasurable component to have the
yeah. You know that study that says
yeah.
The study that says only after 20 seconds of physical hugging do we actually produce oxytocin. I'm wondering how many seconds it takes for us to actually be in presence with each other in a virtual room like this before we can actually produce oxytocin.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to test that.
Like because that's what we miss by not being physically, approximate.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. But this breathing, when you do it 4 times or so, it gives you oxytocin for 20 minutes. It's working. It's really, really working. In the minute, you feel like, yeah.
It's a remarkable thing, this breathing.
Yeah.
So, I feel fortunate that I've been able to ask some questions. I don't yet feel like we've been able to pursue much of it, but that's what I like about these recorded media, is that I, at least myself, can go back and remember what it is that I was thinking and asking at some point. And same for what Doug was saying, or what you're saying, Tammy, what you're saying, Gertrude, everyone else has tried. The things that we cannot actually 100% remember in the flow of things, we can go back and revisit. And so I find myself very fortunate to be in these sessions. I really enjoy it, as well as the connections that are made and strengthened.
I think the oxytocin goes up after some time, and I think we can physically feel it when this connectedness gels in a way. After some silence, after, not always, I mean, can come back again, but in some minutes being together in a way, I can almost physically feel it, that it's there, this coherence between the hemispheres and the body, heart and...
Do you do this, Gertrude?
Sometimes, yeah.
With this and the ankles?
The ankles?
Yes. If you do this with your wrists and your ankles.
Yeah, okay.
You're stimulating this bicameral activity between the two lobes.
Yeah. And you can also do it with your, vice versa.
Yeah. Sometime I want to invite you all here, and then I want to teach you the first 2 or 4 moves of Tai Chi.
Yeah, yeah. Are you a Tai Chi practitioner, master, whatever?
No, I'm not a master. I am a enthusiastic student.
Since how long, Sam?
I first started Tai Chi probably 2007 or 6 or 1, sometime in the early 2000s, mid 2000s. But I've not been a particularly good student. Sometimes I go, sometimes I don't go. There's sometimes periods where I drop out.
I thought that I wanted to say some way in between, but I would like to say it now. We talked about judgment and distinctions and things like that. I think when distinction becomes a judgment, or even beyond, that we use it as a weapon. Sometimes we use them to shut somebody up, to produce something that we want to have from that person. So, for example, when I talked about the streetlight model, I always want to say before, sometimes I don't, use it to distinguish where you are and to have like a diagnostic tool for yourself, and to see, am I completely in the red mode, in the stem brain mode? I'm only reflective, or am I looking for what's wrong here? Or am I in flow? But if I impose it on others, then I produce harm. And say, okay, if somebody says something I don't like, you say, you are in a red mode, come out of it, or something like that. So, for me, it's important to use distinctions to go deeper and understand more, like the Inuit who have 20 or 52, I was told, 52 different words of snow, and we just have 2 or 3. So to get deeper into and make it a better use of it and get, yeah, understand it, reflect it better, but not to use it against others. And that is often used. And then we created it, and if somebody uses it this way, I really feel bad about it, because this was not the design for it. It was just to get deeper into the matter and be able to think. I just have to breathe or run around the block or whatever to have that physical thing. But it's not to impose it on others.
I think this notion of words and language is addressed in the very first lesson of the Tao Te Ching.
How is it addressed, Sam?
That which cannot be named is not that. In other words, you cannot describe the way with words. That which can be named is not the Tao.
Yeah, I guess that's the wholeness, right? Like if you try and create an understanding of a thing that cuts it away from everything else, which is the Tao, so then it's almost like a pre-language concept that can't be expressed in words.
It's also in the way that these words are used in those verses, because they're very short and they're non-precise and they're non-technical. You would even say they're not even well-defined, is that there's always layers of meanings you can get from every revisit to them. And it's basically your way of adding your experience to the interpretation every time you come back to it. But it's suggestive. It's asking you to look in the right direction. But if you technically quibble and you linguistically quibble, you'll never understand it.
It's like Patanjali.
The yogis.
And in the Bible, the first verse is, at the beginning there was the Word, or something like that. I don't know exactly how it's in English, but the Word, was...
Yeah, in English, it's in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was God.
Mm-hmm.
And that's interesting just in terms of, language being the expression of consciousness, an expression of consciousness.
Until we come up with something better.
Yeah. I think that there are many expressions of consciousness, including this language that we're developing in terms of the layering of watching, listening, looking at those cues, seeing when someone's leaning in and has something to add, this kind of biofeedback, visual field, exploring as an expression of consciousness as well. It feels more ephemeral. It's hard to pin down. We talk about how difficult it might be to extract some of the depth of what it is that we're exploring and expressing. I just see such value in going into these places and going deeper and being with the process of feeling the field and what it is that what is as next.
So to the extent
and
that...
maybe we...
No, go ahead, Gertrude.
and maybe some new words come out of our mouth.
So is it fair to say the depth of these connections is in some way correlated to the time we spend together? And if that's true, what does that imply about the way the community could grow, if at all?
I don't think so. I don't think that this is the only. I think it's a combination of enough time, whatever that means, and the depth of connection. Like, I realized that with my kids when I was a full day working mom, and it was not how much time I spent with them, but how present was I with them in those moments. And so I think we need some time, because otherwise we don't have that possibility. And it should be more than 20 minutes somehow.
So Gertrude,
but it needs that depth and that connectedness, because just time doesn't make it.
So Gertrude, let's just use a very concrete example. One of these days, I'm going to ask my friend David Price to join one of these conversations. How would we create that understanding, that sense of connection? Or do we even want to? Okay, but if we wanted to, how would we get that between Tammy and David, or you and David, or Doug and David, or Glenn and David? And is that what we want to do in order to create this community, or is it necessary?
I'm just wanting to clarify what you're meaning, Sam, and suggest that that one of the things that's, I think, valuable to explore together here is intentionally convened conversations. These community sessions are there's a looseness about them that allow anyone to show up, and because there's a lack of clarity that is sensed from having that level of openness, we see people come in and out, and those who understand or sense or feel or experience the value of the collective capacity that's building here, they keep coming back. Those who would like something a little bit more structured, pointed, will explore other spaces. And I think it's a value. Like, if you want to bring someone in, perhaps you want to frame it in such a way where they're able to really introduce themselves, and that everyone is introducing themselves around a specific topic, or something like that, that there's a clearer convening protocol. And that might be what is needed for people who you want to bootstrap into this process. And I think that could be useful. For example, if Art Brock were to join us, he needs to consider best use of his time, because he's, in a really clear track of development. So if people wanted to convene and talk about the holochain and have their questions answered, and offer the connections and collaborations that they think might be able to help, well, then that would be a really useful way to leverage what everyone can bring. So those are the deeper considerations in terms of adding specific people to our community. I think that those kinds of clearly convened conversations can help us to be able to create some other examples of how we connect, collaborate, and explore this space.
I was just thinking of different types that this specifically designed to bring people in. I mean, introducing is one easy one, but there are many different ways of doing it, and one of which could be the one I was talking about, the who am I and what I'm here for. So being maybe, how many have we been today? Was I don't know, 8. Okay, then maybe 9 with him. Then we would have 3 groups in which we had this one answering that question, and the others give it appreciative feedback, and then sharing that in the bigger group again. Not the words that have been spoken, but the experience we had and what was important to share. And I feel this as one of the biggest, I mean, this is really, really deep going. And you can do it over and over again, and you always find other words, and even with the same people, you think of other things because it's a different time. And there are many others that we can use to specifically create that feeling in which people can onboard without feeling left out or alienated.
I would love to have some of those sessions and really practice that form. Because there's simple things around this you know, more technical things around Zoom and how it works that I'd like to get more practiced at, including breakout rooms, which that would need us to figure out. And I think that would be really useful and exciting.
Wow. We hit the second hour.
Yeah, I'm feeling like I should maybe close for myself. I'm so grateful for this space. It's been such a beautiful heartbeat, and I feel our collective capacity building, and it's really nourishing. There's also
sorry.
Yeah, there's also some pain in wanting it to move faster, but I agree with you, Sam. You know, we can't rush what this is because then we miss really important parts. So I'm just following the process and experiencing those tensions without judging myself for having them.
There's a saying, I don't know if it's in English as well, if you're in a hurry, go slowly. And about this urgency, what I more detail to offer in terms of the 3 stages. In the red stage, you are just reacting, and there is no, you don't have outer input except that threat. So you're really like, you just react to that. And in the yellow phase, you have 2,000 impulses from the outside you can deal with it per second. So if you're in that mode, what's wrong here? Where could be a saber-toothed tiger, you can have just a certain number of inputs you can deal with in your logical brain, in your way of dealing with reality. So even if there are 20,000, you can only deal with 2,000 per second. But when you're in the flow stage, in the green stage, you have, through the coherence, the brain waves and with heart and guts, so to say, you have 40 million impulses from the inside and just from the wherever, from that space you are in, to deal with that situation. So becoming calm and coherent in our bodies, that gives us so much more access to everything that we might, after that, deal, or within that, to deal with situations so much better than we can do it with a busy mind. So the busy mind thinks, but I have to, and just goes 2 by 2,000 impulses. And the other one sits there and relaxes and is in coherence and has so much more information to do the right. So intuition comes in there. These impulses are not thoughts, but they are like, my stomach is cringing, or whatever that might be, blood pressure is going up, that I intuitively know what's the right thing to do. So that's for pressing things can reduce my possibility of thinking or of getting the right impulses.
Geertrude, thank you for that expression, because it's one of the primary reasons for practicing things like Tai Chi and yoga or other forms of exercise. So that's a useful reminder to me, hearing you say it back.
Yep.
Also, Tammy, I could infer, but let me just explicitly ask, if there's any part of this recording you'd like not to be shared, then I want to make sure you ask it. Yeah. I mean, you're on mute, but I can see your words from your mouth.
Yeah, I mean, I spoke of my personal situation, but I don't think I don't need that to be private. I didn't mention any names. I'm not harming anyone.
Yeah, okay. And by the way, it may be obvious, but I do think that there is room in the week or the month or the day to set up other forums, even in this community, to address more specific, intent-focused conversations. I mean, I think I did that one time with Me Too, and
I missed that.
But at least it was an attempt, and I think there certainly, is an encouragement to do other attempts as well. And if
you were successful, for the person of the year.
The what?
The person of the year?
Yes. I just saw that. Yes.
This is so good. I mean, it's like they couldn't have chosen anything better. Because
Me Too?
Yeah.
Time Magazine.
Time Magazine.
Yeah. The women who used to be silent.
The silence breakers, they call it. Yeah. The first women that came out and took the heat. Yeah. This is so. Whew. Yeah, when the Roy Moore thing came up, I remembered something when I was 14. But at that time, I felt flattered, and I knew it was not right, but somehow you're, you know, so it's not just black and white. It's you think you're more adult than you actually are at that time.
There's so many questions yet to be asked on these topics. So many.
Yo, I think that's for another
Session.
conversation.
Fighting my tongue right now. Yes. Anyway.
Okay.
Shall we call it a day?
Yes.
And it's so, I'm so grateful that we have those possibilities. I mean, you're on the other side of the world for me, 9 hours apart. And it's like, come over for Christmas, you know? Yes. It really felt like this. I said, oh no, they're far too. Yeah, this is really, I mean, like, yeah, sure.
Wait, Gertrude, where are you? You're not in Berlin, are you? You're in
north of Frankfurt.
North Frankfurt, that's right. Okay.
Are you planning to come to Germany? Or why are you asking for Berlin?
On May 14th, there's a possibility. It's about a 33 to 50% possibility I'm going to be in London on May 14th. So it may be a great time to connect with you, Heiner, Harry, Fleming, you know, whomever else
we'll see.
Might come around. Heidi, you know.
A week later, we have the Integral Conference in Budapest, in Hungary.
Oh. Is that held in English or is it a different language?
There are 27 countries, so when we talk about Europe, it's almost always in English.
Okay.
We have so many different languages that's not possible to.
Okay.
Thank you. I really appreciate both of you and everyone.
Look forward to reconnecting on Sunday, if not sooner.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.